Everybody remembers Outrun, right? The classic Sega arcade racing game where you drive a Ferrari Testarossa down a road, encountering many forks leading to different places, and trying to reach the finish line so you could get some wacky victory celebration? Yeah, we're not touching that. Instead, we're looking at Outrun for the Sega Game Gear. Released in 1991, it's essentially a lighter version of the classic arcade game of the same name. That is to say, fewer tracks, no big structures or arches to be found, and none of the unique celebrations that you get upon completing the track. However, none of that stuff is much of a huge loss because Outrun in its portable format on the Game Gear is still a very good conversion for what it is. Now, for those of you who have never played Outrun, I have no silly quip to taunt you with. But anyway, Outrun is a driving game where the goal is to make it to the end of the course. You're not really trying to win a race or attain a top position or anything. You're just going from point A to point B to point C until you reach the finish line within the time allotted, all the while avoiding traffic as well as avoiding colliding into roadside scenery. Every so often you'll come across a fork in the road where you can go down the left path or the right path, both of which will lead to differing courses beyond that particular checkpoint. And in terms of adapting this core gameplay, Outrun on Game Gear does as good of a job as one would expect from a handheld conversion of the game. Now, like I mentioned before, Outrun on Game Gear can be construed as Outrun Light. There are fewer tracks here than in the arcade version, and as a result, an average race of Outrun will only comprise 4 segments as opposed to the original 5. Not only that, but I found this version of Outrun to be a bit easier than the usual Outrun game, perhaps due to fewer cars being on the track. On the other hand though, control is fairly tight and responsive even with manual gears. There's a fairly good sense of speed when driving, and the game runs at a rather smooth pace. Almost about as good as its Master System counterpart, I suppose. As a bonus, there's an additional versus feature where you can race against a computer opponent, or a second player via Game Link peripheral, on any of the various segments of the main game. I suppose it makes up for the shorter arcade mode, even if it does feel a bit superfluous, but still the additional mode is appreciated. Graphically speaking, Outrun on Game Gear bears something of a lesser appearance in comparison to its arcade counterpart. Hell, it'd be safe to say that it's something of a lesser looking game compared to the Master System version, as evident by the notable lack of larger objects such as arches and things of that nature. Suffice it to say that this is a very barren looking interpretation of Outrun. On the other hand, the various car models are distinguishable enough from each other that you can sort of make them out, and the scaling isn't too bad. On the whole, visuals in Outrun on Game Gear are decent for the most part, but the lack of larger elements certainly gives this Outrun outing a much sparser feel than the others. Much like the arcade original, you have your choice of 3 tunes to choose from in Outrun. You know, the trademark tunes like Magical Sound Shower, Passing Breeze, and the like. And the Game Gear manages rather decent sounding iterations of these classic tunes, as well as the few brief jingles of the game. In regards to sound effects, they sound alright. The few that are there, at least, because you don't get much of it, still sounds alright. All in all, Game Gear owners got a rather nice version of Outrun. It's nowhere near as long or even as challenging as the bigger variants, but Outrun retains the core fundamentals that made the arcade original and equivalent conversions such fun driving games to begin with. If you got a Game Gear and enjoy dabbles of Outrun, consider checking this version out. It's fairly cheap, not at all hard to find, and an all-around good driving game.